we are less than 1 week away from the 2025 NBA draft, and that means that trade talks are destined to heat up. And on today's show, we have a new trade report coming from the man himself, ESPN's Charania, who has revealed new details about Boston's trade pursuits and potential Boston's trade stance on a Derrick White and Jaylen Brown deal that could be potentially happening this offseason. We're going to get into all that in just a moment, but make sure you go down below and hit that thumbs up icon before we get into it, because if you want the Celtics to get better this offseason, let's send a good vibes over on this video. Go down below, like the video, smash the thumbs up so Brad Stevens makes the right moves and the Celtics are competitive next season. All right, let's get into this full quote from Shams Charania, who went on the Pat McAfee Show and kind of said a couple of things similar to reports that he's had in the past. But this is something kind of new to note. How the Celtics are operating in this space right now is that they're looking at a next year as a retooling year. That doesn't mean you don't want to stay competitive. That doesn't mean you don't want to continue. But realistically, without Jason Tatum, it's going to be tough. And look, I don't disagree with what Shams is saying here. The East has gotten better, and it looks in all accounts like Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to remain in Milwaukee, so they're going to remain a player. The Indiana Pacers are heading to Game 7 of the NBA Finals. They're going to remain a player. The Knicks, they're still really good. The Cavs, what are they going to do in this next season? Are they going to make improvements? The Magic just went out there and traded for Desmond Bane, a perfect fit to their young core, and they could look to be a top 3 seed contending for the NBA Finals next season. The East has gotten a little bit tougher. It's not the Western Conference, but look, without Jason Tatum, are the Celtics as good as all those teams? I think they can remain competitive, but I'm not so sure that they're going to be the clear-cut runaway favorite to come out of the East next season without JT. So in that case, what does retooling look like for Boston? We know they have to make moves this offseason. Their luxury tax bill is higher than their current payroll at this current time. But does that mean, selling the farm? I don't necessarily think that is the case. As of right now, the Celtics focus, according to Shams, who said this last week and a couple weeks ago, is that their focus is trading Jrue Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, and Sam Hauser. Holiday being the older player making over $30 million, Porzingis being on a $30 million expiring contract, and Hauser just kind of being a cap casualty, to be frank with you, as he only makes $10 million, but the luxury tax is going to boom that all the way up to an $80 million bill for the Boston Celtics. So it looks like he'll be on his way out as well. But it's not easy to trade these guys away. It is not easy for the Boston Celtics to go trade players away that aren't super highly valued across the NBA, especially when they are already super restricted when it comes to making moves. They are a second apron team, which means that they cannot aggregate contracts in a trade. So they can't trade away Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis and just get off a bunch of money at once. That's not how it works with the new CBA. Plus, teams around the league don't have much money to absorb themselves, so it wouldn't even make sense to throw 2 large contracts at a team and get a bunch of salary cap relief. It's just not how it works at this point. Nobody has cap space, so you're only really going to get around $10 million if you're lucky cutting off on one of those trades. And at the same time, Brad Stevens values Kristaps Porzingis, values Jrue Holiday, and values Sam Hauser to a level that he's not going to just take scraps back in any trade this offseason. So it's clearly not that simple to go out there and find a trade partner for Kristaps Porzingis, Jrue Holiday, and Sam Hauser, although Brad Stevens, we know, is going to try. And on the Jrue Holiday front, we have heard some reported trade talks already going down. Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated reported that the Sacramento Kings and Dallas Mavericks have both been in trade talks around a Jrue Holiday deal. Now, I'm not so sure that the Celtics and the Kings will end up coming to an agreement, because the deal that's being floated around most often is a DeRozan for Holiday swap, and I'm not so sure that the Boston Celtics want DeMar DeRozan and his high salary at this point. Yes, he makes less than Jrue Holiday, but it isn't enough to make a trade super worth it for them, so maybe they would have to find a third team for him to go to, and the Celtics would get a little bit more salary cap relief in a deal with them. But the Dallas Mavericks, on the other hand, I'm a little bit more intrigued by the pieces that could come back to Boston from the Big D. You got P.J. Washington, you got Daniel Gafford, 2 guys who I'm not so sure are going to be part of the Dallas Mavericks' long-term future, so why not ship him up to Boston? We need front court help. We need spacing for a guy like P.J. Washington who can go out there and hit the corner 3. So I'm very intrigued by those 2 cats and the possibility of them being returned to Boston. Plus, Daniel Gafford is on an expiring deal as well, and if you didn't love him, you can move him down the line or end up just letting him go in free agency next offseason. And this might be something that is, kind of accelerated, maybe the first Celtic domino to fall this offseason. We saw this tweet that came out, and a little bit of sleuth job done from a Celtics fan here. Shout out DuPoint17. He said, so Jrue was definitely traded and knows already. Saw his personal chef on Instagram, and she's in Jrue's kitchen. Look at the video and this picture from the listing on the apartment that he bought. Same kitchen. Hey, that steal versus Indy was clutch, big dog. Wish you the best. Hey, Jrue Holiday got us a ring, but it looks like it's not going to be a super long tenure after just signing a 4-year contract extension after lifting the Larry back in 2024. Look, I love Jrue Holiday. I wish he could stay here forever, but the reality of the situation is the Celtics are going through a sale right now, and the new ownership probably does not want their luxury tax bill to be higher than the players that they're paying out there on the basketball court. Now, to Kristaps Porzingis' point, we've heard that there's going to be interest around the league with his expiring contract being the reason that teams would want to trade for him. But as far as teams go, we haven't heard too many real interest out there. And the closest thing we've heard so far is the Phoenix Suns, but that's kind of a maybe at this point. Is it actually reported that they said they're doing background work on Kristaps Porzingis? So I'm not so sure how set in stone their interest actually is. And the deal to get Kristaps Porzingis to Phoenix is very, very difficult. Could the Celtics get involved in a KD trade that ends up sending Porzingis to Phoenix? I'm not so sure, but I'm sure they'd want to get involved. It would be very, very difficult to do so. And then on the Sam Hauser front, it's probably the easiest player to trade out of all three. He's going to be valued across the league, super cheap, cost-controlled deal, $10 million, and everybody wants a plus 40% three-point shooter on their roster. This game has become about 5 out, and Hauser is absolutely the type of player that you would want if you're trying to build a winner and going out there and competing for an NBA title. He played big minutes in the finals last year, and he was absolutely productive. So he would be dumped into a little bit of a mid-level slot. Maybe a team like the Pistons who think they can get up to the next level this offseason will have that non-taxpayer mid-level exception. They send back a pick away or a couple picks away for Hauser, and you dump him right into that mid-level exception spot, and you create that full $10 million by getting rid of Sam Hauser. And if any of these moves go down, we're going to have you covered here on the channel, so that's why you subscribe. If the Celtics make a move, and I'd argue it's when the Celtics make a move this offseason, we will have you covered. We might even go live here on the channel, so make sure you're subscribed and you turn your notifications on so when we post content, you'll know exactly when we do. You get an alert. All right, so more on this Holiday, Porzingis, Hauser stuff. Let's kind of focus on Holiday here because I don't doubt that Brad Stevens can find a good trade partner for Jrue Holiday. Whether it is the Kings, whether it is the Mavericks, or whether it's somebody else who's trying to compete around the league, there is a team out there that's going to end up wanting Jrue Holiday's services enough to give up some decent capital to get him in a deal, like the Los Angeles Clippers, who might think they're a piece away, especially a defensive ball handler like Jrue Holiday away. It could be the Kings or the Mavericks, but I don't doubt that Brad Stevens will find a trade partner for Jrue Holiday. The issue becomes how much money can you actually save in a Jrue Holiday deal? Because it's not just going to be one trade for the Celtics this offseason, or at least leading up to next season's NBA trade deadline when those luxury tax penalties hit. It's going to have to be multiple trades, and it's not going to just end at Jrue Holiday because the most you're probably going to create in a deal sending him away is less than $10 million. And the Celtics, we all know, are over $20 million above the second apron, which they desperately want to get under. Now, if that's the case, and you can't create that much money on a Holiday trade, and maybe making a Porzingis deal isn't all it's cracked up to be this offseason. You can't find a guy for Hauser that you want to send him to. Now suddenly you have to evaluate everything. You have to look at the entire roster, and guys suddenly become less untouchable if you really, really are that desperate to get your salary books in order. So that means looking at a potential Jaylen Brown trade, looking at a potential Derrick White trade if the offers are there. Shams with more here. He said, teams are throwing crazy offers at Jaylen Brown and Derrick White. It would take an insurmountable offer to pry them out of Boston. Look, I don't think that's completely out of the question for that to be the case. We just saw Desmond Bane go for the control of 5 first-round picks, including 4 unprotected. We saw Mikal Bridges last offseason go for 5 unprotected first-round picks, control of 6 future firsts. Derrick White and Jaylen Brown could easily command that type of asset back in a deal. I'm not so sure that I would want to do it, though. And I'm not so sure that Brad Stevens wants to do it either. From everything that we've heard, he wants to remain competitive. He has full faith in Jaylen Brown to take the mantle and use this gap year as a time to elevate his game into one of the upper echelon players in this league. So I don't think he wants to trade Derrick White. I don't think he wants to trade Jaylen Brown. But if the right deal comes along, then maybe he will just have to consider it and potentially pull the trigger. Let me know what you guys think. Would you consider trading Jaylen Brown or Derrick White this offseason? Are they untouchable? Or if the right deal comes along, would you consider dealing them away? Yes or no? You let me know in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, get hooked up with this awesome Celtics hoodie. I know it's the summer months here right now, but you'd be lying if you say you're not spending a good bit of time in that AC. So go get yourself a Celtics hoodie right here. That's 40% off at this link right here. Chatsports.com/BOS hoodie. Chatsports.com/boss hoodie. I'll put that link in the comment section and description of today's video for you guys to make it easier for you. I'm going to get myself one as well. This looks like a lightweight hoodie as well. Go get yourself hooked up with some cheap Celtics gear today. All right. So To wrap up today's show, I'm going to talk about my stance on trading both Jaylen Brown and Derrick White. Jaylen Brown is a very unique case to where there aren't a lot of spots where he could potentially land in the NBA as far as how money is working, where teams are, as far as are they contending, are they rebuilding? Like, if you're a rebuilding team, there's no reason to trade for Jaylen Brown. If you're trading for Jaylen Brown, that means that you are probably using him to be that next one piece that you need to go out there and win an NBA championship. But there aren't that many teams that can actually do that with the money that Jaylen Brown makes. The one team that has been extremely rumored, and there's even some Twitter rumors going around that a deal's already done, is the San Antonio Spurs. And if that deal is real, and they're sending away Stephon Castle, Jeremy Sochan, and Devin Vassell away, and maybe even draft assets. That's what it said in Scott Burgess' tweet, if you know, you know. For Jaylen Brown, then Brad Stevens would be silly not to do that. Like, unfortunately, I love JB, and he's a Finals MVP. He's done so much for this organization. He's spending his summer in Boston right now, giving back to the city. But it's a business at the end of the day, and it might make the most sense if Brad Stevens gets an absolute haul like the one that's being rumored around there right now to trade Jaylen Brown. Because if you're trading for Jaylen Brown, you want him to either be your best player or your highest paid player. And the Spurs are pretty much the only team in the league that are in a unique spot where they have Wemby, the number 2 overall pick that's incoming, both on rookie deals, and can afford to have a player on a supermax contract at this point like a Jaylen Brown. So that is just how I view it. There aren't a lot of places where you could send JB at this point, but the Spurs, if that package is realistic, then absolutely I would jump all over it. On the flip side with Derrick White, I'm not as open to it. I really am not, because then that sends a message and that sends a signal about this team and this franchise that this is done. This core is over, and they are signaling a rebuild. Because as far as trading for Derrick White goes, you're not going to get a player back that is of equal value. And in the case of when we look at the Desmond Bane trade, for instance, because I think that would seriously be a package that looks like what Derrick White would go for, the Grizzlies now are looking at a spot where, yeah, they think they're trying to stay competitive, but man, they just lost one of their best players, a plus 20 point per game scorer, and it's going to be very difficult for them to compete in the Western Conference. So if you trade a guy like Derrick White, I don't think you're getting equal on-court value back immediately in the deal. The Grizzlies clearly didn't. They traded away they got KCP and Cole Anthony. That's not Desmond Bane. So in the case of Derrick White, who makes less than $30 million right now, you're not going to get equal value back on the court. A trade for Derrick White would be centered around draft capital, future first-round picks. I'm talking 3, 4, 5, maybe even the control of 6 future firsts when it comes to adding swaps in there. That tells me you're going for a rebuild, and I don't think the Boston Celtics are in the business of doing that right now. Even if they trade Jaylen Brown away, I think Derrick White is arguably the second most untouchable player on the Boston Celtics when it comes to his value, what he would return back in a trade, and what message that would send to this franchise if you actually made a Derrick White deal, and it would be centered around a bunch of draft picks, signaling a pretty hard reset or rebuild heading into 25, 26, and beyond. That will do it for today's edition of Boston Celtics Today by Chat Sports. If any of these deals go down, if we hear anything rumor-wise heating up with Celtics trades, we will bring it to you right here on the channel. So lock us in, hit that sub button for the best Celtics offseason content on YouTube. We'll see you guys on the next one. And as always, let's go C's.